This FedGov Today program is sponsored by Collibra and Carasoft. On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, a secret cloud is coming for the State Department, a sea change for the NatSec and Intel communities, and 4 core centers of research at DARPA. Welcome to FedGov Today with Francis Rose. The State Department is moving its top secret network to the cloud. That move is happening in the Bureau of Intelligence and Research at State. Jimmy Hall Jr. is the Chief Information Officer and Director of the Technology and Innovation Office at the Bureau. At DOTAS 2023, he tells me about the mission of the Bureau and how the cloud move will work.
The Bureau of Intelligence and Research is a bureau in the State Department whose primary mission is to deliver and coordinate timely and objective intelligence so we can advance diplomacy, right? Our motto is intelligence, empowering diplomacy. We strive to live that every day. And so our Assistant Secretary, Brett Holmgren, pulled me to the side when I arrived in February and said, hey, I have some strategic goals I want you to get after, and I have some specific objectives that I want you to tackle so we can move forward. So specific goals, he created a document called the 2025 Strategic Plan. And in that strategic plan, there's 2 goals specifically land in my wheelhouse. That's strengthening cybersecurity and undertaking a digital transformation. And those fit well with expanding our TS-SCI fabric. And so he said, okay, Jimmy, specifically what I want you to do, I want you to expand our TS-SCI connectivity to embassies, camps, station posts, right? I want you to fortify our cybersecurity posture. You know, we were meeting the compliance levels, but taking it to another level, right? So we're not out of compliance, but just take it to another level. I want you to take a look also at your user experience and how we deliver those service capabilities. And then lastly, he wanted me to move to a TS cloud adoption. Right? And so all of those things make sense. They nest well with the strategic goals. And so I set out to move in that direction. And so we made great progress when it comes to a TS-SCI expansion. We've moved to about 5 or 6 camp stations and posts that we didn't have prior to my arrival. In addition to that, we now have a cloud experience in AWS, right? So AWS is part of C2E. So we have this migration to the TS cloud. We've expanded to a few camp station posts that we didn't have for the TS connectivity. And also, part of our TS-SCI connectivity is not just the equipment, but it's also the platforms that we deliver. So we have something we call Tempo 2.0. And we've now moved to a digital dissemination platform, Tempo 2.0, so folks can see the intelligence products on JWIX. They can see the intelligence products on SIPRNet, and they can also see those products on OpenNet, right? And so that's a big deal. That's a huge deal. Obviously, it's credential-based, so the average person can't go log in and see those. But with the right credentials, you can go log in and see our credentials and see our products, right? And so that's a huge win for where we are. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited for the progress that we made, and I'm excited about what we're doing for diplomacy.
Strikes me that you bring to the table a real big benefit to the State Department, same way as Kelly Fletcher does, the CIO, in that you have a lot of OCONUS experience from your time at the Defense Department. Does that apply to the work that you're doing at State?
It absolutely applies. So my 30 years in the Army, I was honored to serve both in the IT and intelligence fields. And so I'm suited for this job. Number one, Kelly Fletcher and I previously served in DOD. And so we had a relationship there. We understand where we're going. We understand the goals and where we need to go from a department perspective. And so it's paid dividends. And then the contacts and the relationships that we have overseas has made this even a more smoother process. And also let me add the other CIOs that are here in DOTAS, as well as lends themselves to us being successful in what we want to do. Right? So everybody understands what we want to do and where we're going.
Your presentation here is about partnerships. What are the most important partnerships, whether they're within the government, with other governmental organizations, from other countries? I imagine those are important at the State Department. Your industry collaboration partnerships are probably very important. What are some of the most important ones to you, Jimmy?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question. And so I'm here at DOTAS to not only collaborate with my CIO partners, but I'm also here to collaborate with industry. And so there's no one entity that can get it done alone. And so whether you're in the federal government or whether you're in industry, it takes a partnership. It absolutely does. And also this gives me an opportunity to take advantage of emerging technology, right? And so in some instances when I'm in Washington, D.C., I'm not able to get out and visit industry and understand those emerging technologies and what's out there and what industry is bringing to the table. And so it's important for me now, not just to link up with industry here, but once I get back to DC, also academia. And we need to do a better job of linking up what we're doing with industry, linking what we're doing with academia. And at the end of the day, right, empowering that diplomacy to advance peace, work for a more prosperous world, right, and a more peaceful and safer world. And that's what I love doing. And again, I'm suited for this. And I'm happy to have those relationships that you talked about. Yeah.
What, in your experience, makes for a good partnership, whether it's with your CIO colleagues and peers, or whether it's industry, government, or whatever? What does each side bring to the table, in your view, in a successful partnership like that?
Sure. A successful partnership starts with communication, right? First and foremost. You have to communicate. And secondly, a successful partnership requires ownership. Right, not just buy-in, but ownership, right? And when you're working with industry partners and they feel like I'm just as invested in this solution set as you are, then you tend to be more successful, right? And so those two things are key to any type of partnership, regardless of if it's academia, industry, or federal government partners, right? We have to communicate and we have to have that ownership to be successful. So that's what I see as two of the keys.
One of the things that Kelly talked about when she was on FedGov Today was improving the user experience. What does that look like in the portfolio that you're working on, Jimmy?
So it's very foundational for me when it comes to user experience. Right? So deliver a product that's reliable, that's there, that's all the time. So improve the user experience from that perspective. The also user experience for me is a better help desk experience, right? And so I have a problem, I submit a ticket, I want that problem solved in a timely manner. So that's important as well. So having a user experience from a service capability delivery perspective that is there, but also knowing that I could call someone and get the services that I need in the time that I need. And so those are the two most important things for me from a service delivery perspective. But then you also need a competent workforce, right? And sometimes it goes without saying, but you have to say it and you have to go out and you have to recruit those people that can respond to those service delivery requirements and respond to those help desk notifications in a timely manner and come to a resolution that doesn't prohibit the mission.
You used a term recently I'd like to ask you about. You talked about, in the context of top secret information, compartmented information connectivity. What do you mean by compartmented? What does that look like?
So those who have a need to know for particular information has access to the information, not just because I have a connection in my embassy or my camp or my station or my post, but also I have a need for it. But it's also important to know that I have a need for it. I can deliver that compartmented information and safeguard it. You know, data is a weapon in a lot of places, and we talk in terms of how important data is. And so you have to compartmentalize, you have to safeguard it, and you have to deliver it to those who need to know it. And then understand the difference between all the above.
Mm-hmm. You talked about the workforce a moment ago. What does your workforce development plan strategy look like to get those people to be able to do the things that we've talked about in this conversation?
Sure. That's a great question, right? The workforce is the center of what we do and all about our business. We couldn't get it done without the workforce. And so let me just first of all give a shout out to my team. Kudos for their dedication and professionalism, what they're doing to advance diplomacy from the State Department, particularly in the INR Bureau. Just like most CIO teams, right? We're out recruiting, we're hiring, and then we want to retain. We're taking advantage of those IT and those cyber incentives and those bonuses that are there. From where I sit, I want folks to enjoy those bonuses for the rest of their lives if possible, right? And so that's important. I've also taken a look at telework, right? And so a lot of times folks say, well, if you're on the JWICs, there's no way that you should telework. And so I'm looking at it from a different perspective, is that it's okay, the situation with telework once or twice a week without, hurting the mission for sure, right? That's number one. But number two, where can we take advantage of what industry and society writ large is doing, which is they're offering 1 or 2 days of telework. And so we're doing the same thing. So I'm working really hard on retention. And at the end of the day, you know what? We've come out of COVID now, and we need to start sending folks back to school and getting those certifications, because that's important to people. If they're allowed to get a certification, if they're allowed to hone their skills in IT and cyber, we tend to retain them more often than not. And so that's why the workforce is important. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to give them a shout out. And hey, if you're looking for a job in the State Department, come work in intelligence and research.
You can read more about the Bureau's move to the cloud on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, a sea change for the NatSec and Intel communities. FedGov Today with Francis Rose continues in a moment. If you want insights from agency and industry leaders on the latest topics in technology, management, workforce, defense, and acquisition, sign up for the FedGov Today podcast with me, Francis Rose. I release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so you'll stay up to date on the issues that matter most to federal government leaders. Listen at fedgovtoday.com and everywhere you get your shows. Don't miss out on the conversation. Follow the podcast today. Welcome back. The Chief Digital and Artificial Intelligence Office at the Defense Department will host an AI symposium the third week of February. The title of the event will be Advantage DoD 2024, Defense Data and AI Symposium. You can read more about it on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Twan Do is Vice President of Sales at Collibra. At DODAS 2023, he tells me what he thinks is ahead for AI in the national defense and intelligence communities this year.
I think AI is the most consequential change in our lifetime. It is affecting us as just regular, ordinary citizens. Probably on the drive in, the car next to you was using AI to make sure that they were changing lanes safer. In the healthcare community, radiologists are using AI to help detect malignant tumors with more accuracy. And AI is also being used in the intelligence community and the Department of Defense. Same type of logic is helping analysts detect troop movements, and portable missile silos being moved into locations. So AI is the most consequential change in technology for us in our lifetime, whether it's us affecting us as civilians or protecting us through our Department of Defense and intelligence community.
What are the organizations that are using it well doing? What do those organizations have in common that they're getting good outcomes from the way they're deploying AI and so on?
Well, I think one of the things that we're seeing, and I'm really proud of, and I'm really excited about seeing this change, has been around really not the technology, but about the people. I've been in this industry for greater than 20 years now, both as a member of the armed forces and now in the industry that supports the federal government. And one thing that I've seen is a change in the demographics of the workforce. AI is just automating human actions. And whereas the workforce that has been developing AI used to be homogenous, it's now a lot more diverse. And it's an intentional diversity that we're seeing. I talk about making sure that we are bringing in different folks that haven't really been in that same demographic, women and underrepresented minorities, giving them a space to be part of the conversation, part of the development of AI and AI-like technologies, so that when we build technologies, we're innovating with a broader lens and a common place. And we're doing it with a culture that works, a culture that allows folks to learn in a safe and collaborative manner.
Yeah. What, beyond the fact that it's the right thing to do, what is the benefit, what's the better outcome that the department, the IC, and so on will receive from that diversity of the workforce?
Yeah, the diversity of the workforce. We all have approached this time from a different method that they walked through, and that experience gives you a different way to solve a problem. And when you bring in that diverse workforce, there's multiple ways to solve that same problem, and some of those ways may actually be better than the way it's always been done. Nobody has a monopoly on good ideas, and it is the job of leaders to harness the best ideas out of the best people.
Mm-hmm. What do you advise leaders in the IC and DoD and so on to do to measure the progress that they're making, not just on diversity in and of itself, but on the better outcomes of the technologies that they're implementing, like AI and others, that maybe we don't know what the mature end state looks like?
Yeah, I think leaders, I'm going to borrow an old adage, fail fast. Promote an environment where people can give ideas, try out those ideas, and recognize when they're not working, and then adapt and overcome, right? And I think within the DoD and the intelligence community, they are adopting that mentality of agile procurement, agile development, recognizing that not every idea is going to succeed, and then moving on from them and finding the next best idea.
You can read more about AI in the national defense and intelligence communities on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. Up next, 4 core centers of research at DARPA. FedGov Today with Francis Rose. We'll be right back. If you want insights from agency and industry leaders on the latest topics in technology, management, workforce, defense, and acquisition, sign up for the FedGov Today podcast with me, Francis Rose. I release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so you'll stay up to date on the issues that matter most to federal government leaders. Listen at fedgovtoday.com and everywhere you get your shows. Don't miss out on the conversation. Follow the podcast today. Welcome back. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency's Information Innovation Office will drive 4 research thrusts this year. Those 4 thrusts include dozens of programs. Kathleen Fisher is director of the I2O office at DARPA. At DOTAS 2023, she tells me how DARPA chose those 4 research areas.
Every year we do a strategy analysis of what the office is doing. So I2O is the Information Innovation Thrust, office of DARPA. So we're focusing on information really broadly construed. And so those 4 thrusts are artificial intelligence. And we talk about it as proficient artificial intelligence, which is more or less artificial intelligence that you could trust with your life and not be stupid to do so. The information domain, which is broadly construed information science, and how can we have information integrity? How can we have information systems that we can trust when it's being manipulated by all sorts of different kinds of people and can be used for surveillance and things like that? And then the third one is offensive and defensive cyber. As we know, and as we're getting into warfighting, cyber is now a warfighting domain. So how do we use that domain, both to, how do we defend it and how do we attack in that domain? And then the last one is resilient systems. You can think of that as how do we build the cyber domain so that it is easier to defend? And every year we go and look at that and we say, are those still the right domains for us to be looking in? We do think of them as descriptive rather than proscriptive. So if we think of there's something else that we should be doing in this domain that doesn't fit in one of those areas, we go ahead and do it anyway. And our office is always, DARPA's mission is creating and detecting strategic surprise, things that are over the horizon that are important for national security. So if there's something that is not in one of those buckets, but is important for national security in a surprise kind of way, we just go ahead and do it anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, how did you determine that, or how do you examine on an annual basis that those are the 4 that you still want to focus on, or that there is some other area that you want to add, or that it's time to move on from one of those?
Yeah, so we talk to a ton of people, both within the agency and outside of the agency. We have a think tank of 30 thought leaders from industry and academia that on an annual basis are doing lots of studies and workshops. We talk to partners in the services and with our performer base, so people who work with us on a regular basis. We talk to lots of people in university. Basically, we talk to tons and tons of people. We do offsites and we brainstorm. Our program managers do lots of crazy brainstorming exercises, and then we sit down and we scratch our heads, and and at the end of the day, we put a proposal forward to the agency of this is what we think we should do. They've been relatively stable for a while. They do shift around. It's our best guess, basically. I
want to start with the 4th one first that you mentioned. Resilience is a term that people seem to define differently all across the federal government. What specifically do you address when it comes to resilience?
Yeah, so we kind of think of it as twofold. One is, how do we build digital systems or software, hardware-based systems that are guaranteed to do what their legitimate owners want them to do and not what an adversary can coerce or trick them into doing? And how do we make them so that they're plastic, so that the legitimate owner can revise them and iterate to make them change over time, again, to do what the legitimate owner wants them to do?
Cyber warfare is, cyber operations is something that for a long time the federal government didn't want to acknowledge. As you said earlier, I think everybody widely recognizes now that it is its own domain. How has that evolved over time? How has the domain evolved over time? And how has the way that DARPA examines it, researches it, and thinks about the future of it evolved over time?
Yeah, so when I was a program manager at DARPA in 2011, that was when the memo came out that DARPA actually does investigate offensive cyber. So for a long time, it was like, no, but I think recognizing that cyber is a full-blown military domain, like the fact that we do investigate offensive missiles, that's not a hush-hush secret thing. Right. So the fact that offensive cyber we don't talk about that for a really long time, I think was kind of a strange thing. So we've come a long way in the last 15 years. I think the frontier now is a lot with AI and the interaction of AI and cyber, and how will that technology change what's going on. I think one of the really exciting things in AI right now is a program that DARPA is just starting, is AICC, which is a defensive program of how do we automate the defense of systems at speed and scale. So the fact that we have infrastructure software that is vulnerable, right? We had Avril Hines' testimony to Congress in February saying that in the event that China were to invade Taiwan, they would likely carry out destructive cyber attacks against U.S. civilian infrastructure in advance, and that they very likely have the capability of doing that. I think is a huge, wake-up call, because we've kind of known that for a while. But the fact that they're saying that to Congress and to the American people, that we really need to be doing this, and then the fact that a lot of that infrastructure is, software infrastructure is based on open source software, right? We really, really need to make that software more secure at speed and scale. Right? How do we do that? And I think so that's the kind of threat. Mm-hmm. And the promise is foundation models have shown promise at identifying vulnerabilities at software, again, kind of at speed and scale. And so the AICC challenge, which was announced at Black Hat in August of last year, and the registration is just now in the beginning of December open, is challenging anyone basically in the country to register and produce their solution of automatically finding and patching those vulnerabilities. Offers a really promising solution to finding and fixing vulnerabilities at speed and scale, so that if we needed to, we could go and fix a lot of those vulnerabilities really fast.
I'm struck by the term that you used about AI at the beginning of our conversation, proficient artificial intelligence, and you defined it, I think, very eloquently. Is that a DARPA unique definition or term? Because that's not a term that I'm familiar with in a lot of the conversation going on, both in national defense and FedCiv as far as AI goes.
It is a term that our office has used and termed over the last probably 5 or 6 years to encompass a lot of the good properties that we want to have over AI. So it encompasses sort of an intuition or explainability, that you can have an intuition or an understanding of what it's doing and why it's doing, a sense of trust. And trust is a complicated, multifaceted term. It's not a linear term. It has multi dimensions to it. Like, is it competent? Does it understand? Is it competent to do what it's setting out to do? Do you understand? Does it understand what you actually want it to do? Does it have a moral compass that you agree with? It's not following somebody's instructions that you wouldn't want it to do, even if it knows what it's doing, right? Mm-hmm. So proficient in some senses in trying to capture kind of all these different dimensions of capability that are not just competency.
I jotted down a couple of the terms that people have used over the last several months that I just recalled quickly in that area. Responsible AI, ethical AI, explainable AI. It sounds like what you're going for is, as you said, encompassing all of that.
Right. It's intended to be a non-loaded term that encompasses many of these aspects.
Yeah. How does one know AI is proficient, or does one just know when one sees it?
Yeah. So I think that's actually a research term, right? Like right now we are evaluating AI based on, testing. And like we've spent millennia trying to figure out how to test people, and we still aren't really all that good at testing people, although we have millennia of experience of how to extrapolate people's behavior based on testing. We're just now, we're trying to test AI systems. The AI systems are enormous, right? Their sort of behavioral frontier is gigantic, and we're probing it at points that we've thought to probe it at. But how do we know that those probing points that we've taken are the right probing points and that we're not missing some piece that we should be probing at, but we haven't yet thought, like the recent results that showed that if you just asked it to repeat poem infinitely, that would start to spew out secrets that you didn't want to.
Right.
So I think we're just in the infancy of understanding how to evaluate frontier scale models in an appropriate way. So I think that question of how do you know is something that is itself a really, really important research question.
As we have about a minute left, so this might be a terrible question to ask with a minute left. Is that a rhetorical question, or is that a knowable question in your view?
Well, so I think this is something that we're actively thinking about at DARPA is how do we do this? And is this a scientific question, or is this a philosophical question, or is this part of it's a philosophical question and part of this is a research question? We have a program called In the Moment, which is exploring to what, how do AI-based systems make ethical questions, and can they make ethical questions answers in the same way that people do, or is it different? And how do you evaluate that? So we're exploring this from a technical perspective at DARPA.
You can read more about the Information Innovation Office at DARPA on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. FedGov Today continues in a moment. If you want insights from agency and industry leaders on the latest topics in technology, management, workforce, defense, and acquisition, sign up for the FedGov Today podcast with me, Francis Rose. I release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so you'll stay up to date on the issues that matter most to federal government leaders. Listen at fedgovtoday.com and everywhere you get your shows. Don't miss out on the conversation. Follow the podcast today. Welcome back. In today's event spotlight, West 2024 is coming from AFCEA International and the U.S. Naval Institute. West is back at the San Diego Convention Center February 13th through 15th. This year's edition has a great lineup of sea service speakers, the largest exhibit floor in its history, lots of special events and networking and much more. You can read more and register at fedgovtoday.com/events. FedGov Today returns next Sunday morning at 10:30 with two chief information officers, Ann Duncan at Energy and Linnea Jones at CIA. I'm Francis Rose. I'll see you next Sunday. Thanks very much for watching. Have a great week. If you want insights from agency and industry leaders on the latest topics in technology, management, workforce, defense, and acquisition, sign up for the FedGov Today podcast with me, Francis Rose. I release new episodes every Tuesday and Thursday, so you'll stay up to date on the issues that matter most to federal government leaders. Listen at fedgovtoday.com and everywhere you get your shows. Don't miss out on the conversation. Follow the podcast today.